Cultivating the eternal harvest, defining the hereafter focus. So you hear the phrase hereafter focus thrown around a lot, right? Especially in spiritual circles. But we rarely actually stop to dissect what it means. Today, in this explainer, we're unpacking a fascinating philosophical epiphany from our source material. We're going to look closely at the true nature of religious rewards and figure out what cultivating an eternal harvest actually looks like. It's a real train of thought that completely challenges our foundational understanding of why we do what we do. Okay, let's dive right into this. We have to start with the big question. What does the hereafter focus actually mean? See, the author of our source material noticed a pretty huge contradiction. People are always talking about focusing on the afterlife, but at the exact same time, they're running massive projects, building institutions, and grinding to make money right here, right now. It's a bit of a cognitive dissonance, isn't it? If the ultimate goal is the hereafter, well, what's the actual mechanism linking our present-day ambitions to that future reality? Now, if you ask around, you usually get the traditional view. When people think about preparing for the next life, they almost immediately jump to reading scripture, diving into religious studies, or doing traditional rituals. The basic assumption is that these explicitly religious acts are the main currency for the hereafter. But our source asks a really profound question here. How can studying scripture literally be the harvest of the hereafter? Think about the logical gap that exposes. The whole purpose of scripture is to guide us right now in this life. When we study these texts, we get the results here. It shapes our current behavior. But in the eternal reality, in the hereafter, the source points out that believers will have God directly. There won't be any real need for scripture in the afterlife. So, if a harvest means reaping results that are only available in the hereafter, studying scripture doesn't really fit the bill, because its utility is primarily for the present world. And this leads to a super common, almost gamified view of spirituality. The author playfully critiques this, calling it a point-based system. It's basically the idea that doing good deeds is exactly like racking up credit card reward points. You do a good deed here, you earn a point, and you just stash it away in some cosmic bank account to cash in later on. But our source pushes back hard on this transactional mindset. It's just too simple. It completely detaches us from the actual spiritual transformation that's supposed to be taking place. Section 1, Surah Ashura, the harvest. To find a better answer to all this, our source turns to a central text that completely shifts the paradigm. The verse reads, "To him who desires a harvest in the life to come, we shall grant an increase in his harvest." I want you to really sit with that word for a second. Harvest. It's not a transaction. It implies a process. It takes cultivation, time, and eventually reaping what was sown. The divine promise here is focused entirely on the individual's intention, actually desiring that eternal future outcome. But the verse finishes with a really stark contrast. It says, "Whereas to him who desires but a harvest in this world, we may give something thereof, but he will have no share in the blessings of the life to come." Those are absolute ultimate stakes. If your focus, your desire is totally rooted in the immediate, tangible results of this world, hey, you might get them, but you forfeit the eternal. Which brings us right back to our core problem. If we aren't just racking up points, and we aren't just studying scripture for later, what exactly is this harvest we're supposed to desire? So here is the brilliant synthesis the author arrives at. The true harvest of the hereafter means cultivating things that actually exist in the hereafter. We are talking about deep, internal character traits, ultimate happiness, pure satisfaction, enduring patience, achieving a complete no-ego state. These noble qualities aren't some scorecard you keep in your back pocket. They are a state of being, and that is what you're actually trying to achieve. This is exactly why the text uses the word harvest. Think of it as an agricultural process. Step 1, you plant a seed in this life through your actions and choices. Step 2, it grows. And crucially, it grows very slowly. Character development takes immense patience. It is absolutely not an overnight thing. Then, Step 3, it finally bears fruit in the hereafter, blossoming into that egoless, fully satisfied state of being. Section 2, planting seeds of character. So let's see how this actually translates into practical, everyday reality. The author brings up a highly relevant, deeply challenging case study, starting an institution to help Muslims combat Islamophobia. Now, on the surface, society views this as an incredibly noble task, right? Most of us would instantly categorize this as doing work for the hereafter. But when we apply our new framework, the author asks a really piercing question. Which part of the hereafter are we actually desiring when we do this? When forced to be truly honest, the realization is Pretty stark, because building an institution requires funding, reputation, status, visible success, all highly tangible, immediate things. The author realizes that the drive behind a massive project like this might actually be overwhelmingly worldly. Like, maybe 95% of the desire is worldly, with only a tiny 5% fraction actually focused on true internal character building. It leads to this sobering conclusion that, despite our best intentions with these grand projects, we might actually be completely lost, confusing worldly achievement with an eternal harvest. Section 3, Community and the Greater Good. Trying to figure out how to pivot away from this trap, the author does something surprising. They actually consult an AI. And the AI's explanation provides a massive missing link. It points out that when we do good for our community, the community itself becomes stronger. By shifting the focus away from your individual legacy or your institutional success and placing it on collective well-being, we can achieve a greater good together than we ever could alone. And this is exactly how you cultivate that no-ego state. You have to subordinate your own personal, worldly desires to the needs of the collective. The author's reaction to this is just fantastic. Bullseye. That is the exact moment of clarity. Making the community stronger, working selflessly for the group, that naturally cultivates patience, it removes ego, and it builds those exact noble internal traits that actually make up the hereafter harvest. The theory finally aligns perfectly with practical action. But, and this is a massive but, identifying the solution is not the same as executing it. The author immediately contrasts this beautiful, ideal picture of a selfless community with the harsh reality on the ground. We might want to make the community stronger, but there's a critical problem. There's no unity to actually work together. Everyone is stuck in their own silo. And even worse, there is a fundamental lack of leadership to guide that collective effort. Which leaves us with a really profound challenge, and it perfectly wraps up this explainer. If the true eternal harvest is cultivated by putting aside our ego to build a unified community for the greater good, do we actually have the unity and leadership required to pull it off? Ask yourself, are your current projects just feeding your ego? Are they planting seeds for collective eternal harvest? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I hope this gives you a completely new lens to view your daily focus.